Right, good evening everybody. So yeah, Mount Florida Community Council, or MoFloCoCo, as we've given it the name. So Shaw asked me to just share some examples of what a community council might do. There are other community groups, but community council is one type of group that you'd find commonly in Glasgow. There's 79 in Glasgow. And so what you'll see is a few examples of from what we were doing over the last couple of years. There are many other examples and many other better examples. You'll see what we were up to. So quick introduction for myself. Prior to joining the Community Council, I had no prior experience in community work or anything like that. I'm an engineer by training. I work in manufacturing. And I joined the Community Council in 2011, which is when I first moved to Glasgow. So a few words about Mount Florida. So Mount Florida is found in the south of Glasgow, south side. And in that area, you'll find a variety of different types of housing. So in the north, there's 4 blocks. In the middle, there's tenements and high-rises. And in the southern area, you'll find terraced houses. And at the very bottom of the area, there's quite desirable sandstone terraced houses. So a big variety of housing conditions. 2 big features of the area is first, on Cathcart Road, there's the independently owned shops that we're very proud of. It's a big feature. It's really sort of centre of the community, those locally owned shops. And there's the National Stadium, Hampden, is there as well. If I overlay the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, you can see the red area shows pockets of relative deprivation and the blue areas of relative affluence compared to the Scottish averages. So that just shows that we've got a huge variety of people that we're trying to represent. So I'm going to share the case study in 3 parts, and it's going to be structured around the constitutional objectives of all community councils in Glasgow. So all 79 have these same 6 objectives, and as I'm the chair of the community council, so I take it as one of my primary roles is to make sure we stay true to the Constitution. We act in line with the constitutional objectives. So a little bit of information is that I put the objectives at the top of every agenda of every meeting, just to remind community councillors, you're not here to talk about the pothole outside your front door, which was a problem in the past. You're here to talk about everybody's needs in the community and to find out what they're interested in and represent their needs. So the first 2 objectives for all community councils they're both talking about ascertaining the views of local people and then articulate them to the relevant authorities. So the first thing we do in this area is to reach out, to make as many people in there as possible aware of our existence and encourage them to get in touch with anything that's on their minds, really. So we put out a newsletter. In fact, it's just been delivered at the moment. I've got some examples if you want to see them. 3,000 printed for 2,700 letterboxes in the area. We have a Facebook following of 1,200, 600 people on Twitter. We do online surveys about particular things. I'll come back to that. So we typically get 300 responses in a year, and we have an email list with 200 people on it as well. So, and then we'll do trying to balance face-to-face versus online participation methods. We also will do events. We'll do consultation events for particular projects. And if a community organisation, such as the School Parent Partnership, is holding an event, we'll try and get a stall there to, again, have a face-to-face interaction with people. A particular example of ascertaining the views of local people is what we call the Hampden Neighbours Project. And this has been ongoing since 2014 when we had the athletics for the Commonwealth Games held at Hampden. And there's an online survey. People can fill it any time, and we promote it after each major football match and each concert. And we get 200 responses a year. And it's not like a scientific poll of opinion or anything like that. It's just trying to get really, really deep insight on really, really local issues from the people that know them best, the people that live right there. So we have comments about illegal parking, and that's led to insights about where are the particular problems, and we've spoken to the relevant authorities in the council about how they could adjust their enforcement regime. Through discussions with the police, we've used outcomes from the survey to help them plot their patrols outside the stadium to catch the trouble hotspots that we know exist immediately before and immediately after football matches. And littering, so with LES, we are able to direct them to the worst spots immediately needing to clean up after a match. And through the licensing process, we've also, a really important outcome was through the evidence that came out of the survey, we were able to persuade that the provision of portaloos is a requirement of the license for concerts. So that's a big result for us, believe it or not. Okay, so that's some examples of how we're ascertaining the views of local people. The next two objectives that all community councils have is all about acting as a voice for the local area. And for this one, I'll just use the examples in the area of planning. So Mount Florida Community Council is one of 5 councils that forms what we call the Victoria Forum. I can see some other members here tonight. And these are community councils that are concerned about the redevelopment of the Victoria Infirmary, which has been vacated by the NHS. And we've, talking to Oliver's language of earlier on, we're exploiting the full range of tools afforded to us by the legislation. So we have read the city plan. The city plan says there should be a master plan for the site. We think that's the vehicle to make sure the site is redeveloped to address the needs of the whole area. And through our campaign, we've forced the developer to provide a master plan. And furthermore, we've demonstrated the need for the councillors for the ward to facilitate a working group. So Councillor Archie Graham is facilitating a working group, which met today, in fact, aimed at developing a master plan for the area surrounding the site, not just the site itself. So that's where we've engaged with the planning process and the legislation to try and represent the needs and the opinions of local people. Another example which hasn't gone quite so well is it's just outside the boundary of our site, but there's a supermarket which is to be redeveloped so instead of being one big massive supermarket which doesn't compete with the shops in Mount Florida, it's now going to be a small complex of smaller shops and fast food outlets, which does start to compete with the independently owned shops in our area. That's something we're concerned about. And what we found here was that the developer and its consultants were able to steer their application through the legislation and avoid the need for consultation. And we felt that's an example of being disempowered through the imbalance of power between the developer and the community in the planning process. And that's something I'd ask the panel to consider later on. And if I've got a few minutes left, so I'll just talk the last 2 objectives on the constitutional objectives. And those are about taking any other action as deemed fit to support the interests of the area. And for this one, I'll talk about a project we call the Leatherby Triangle Project. And it originated in a concern about the amount of littering in the area. And the idea was that instead of just putting pressure on LES to go around and pick up more and more litter, we would try and foster community spirit, pride in the area, and discourage littering in the first place. So we've been generously supported by the Planning Partnership and through the Participatory Budgeting Project. We've gone through a detailed consultation design process aimed at regenerating an underutilised space. So here's a picture of that space. It's a triangle, as you'd expect. And it's, at the moment, it's a little more than a sort of cross between a litter trap, a dog toilet, a traffic island. And the picture you see here is taken from the first floor window of the primary school. So it's in a densely tenemented area. It could be so much more, but it's just sitting there. So we're aiming to do we are driving a community-led project to regenerate that space. So throughout last year and into the beginning of this year, we ran an extensive consultation process with some online consultation, but lots of face-to-face activity. So in the pictures there, you see a consultation exercise carried out by architects paid for from Community Planning Partnership money within the school to get the views of local school children. There's events held in the triangle, in the green space, to clean it up, to talk to people about what that site could be. And there's a design workshop at the bottom right there. That process came up with 3 options, and a preferred option has been identified. And we're now in the process of doing the detailed engineering design. Well, that's the next step. The big thing is to get the people in, recruit new people, the skills that we'll need to steward the amount of money that we'll need to raise for that. So that's an example of taking on our initiative, doing something that has local support and is in the interest of the area. So last slide. So what would help? What would take us to that next level on the journey that we've been on for some time to promote community participation and empowerment? From the point of view of our community council, or from our experience, the big thing we'd like to help with is about recruitment. So we're looking for help to widen the pool of volunteers that would be willing to take some action and some responsibility on behalf of their community. And there are volunteers out there, but at the moment I think in some places community councils don't always have a good reputation. So someone with the tenacity and the skills that we're looking for might go off somewhere else, which is great. They'll go and run the BB brigade or coach a football team, that's great. But if we can show that community representation has power, is empowered, it's enabled, then we'll get more capable people into community councils. And a second, once we've got them in, we need to develop them. So I think I would ask the council to take I think there's potential for the council to take a more assertive approach in facilitating that, perhaps through independent agencies or NGOs, to avoid any sort of, there are places where people are a bit suspicious about the ulterior motives of the council, but some way of facilitating the share of and the spread of ideas between community councils and other community groups. And the third point I'd ask for help with is about the planning process. And I know there's consultations and activity going to regarding legislation in Scotland, but the current presumption in favour of development, in favour of the applicant, needs a counterbalance. It just doesn't. The community is disempowered, even when we're enabled with the support of Planning Aid Scotland, to understand the legislation. So what? We can't do anything. We're still disempowered. So the right of community appeal is too strong a counterbalance, but we need something in between. So that would be my plea for help. I hope the panel can consider that later. So, thank you very much.